She never imagined a simple cleaning job would lead her here, standing in front of a millionaire, trembling, holding a paper covered in strange foreign symbols. He smirked, tossing it at her like a joke. "Translate this," he said, laughter echoing around the boardroom. The other men chuckled too, because in their eyes she was just the maid. But as her eyes moved across the page, her heart pounded for a different reason. She understood every single word. What was written there could change everything, his company, his money, even his future. He thought it was a game, until she started reading aloud. And in that moment the room fell silent. For years, Alana Brooks had worked quietly in the background, dusting shelves, pouring coffee, and polishing the marble floors of Harrington Enterprises. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, her navy uniform pressed and spotless, her smile polite but distant. To the men in suits she was invisible, a shadow moving between conference rooms. What they didn't know was that Alana held a secret far greater than the title Maid. Before life took a harsh turn, she'd been a top student at a university abroad studying linguistics. But after her mother's illness and mounting debts, she dropped out and returned home, taking whatever work she could find. Cleaning offices wasn't her dream, but it was honest work, and it paid the bills. Still, the sting of being overlooked never left her. She'd watch the executives laugh, their words cutting like knives disguised as jokes. They'd talk about her as if she couldn't understand, assuming she was uneducated, slow, beneath them. She learned to stay silent, to blend in, because silence was safer than confrontation. That morning seemed no different. The meeting room buzzed with tension, men in tailored suits flipping through documents. She quietly replaced the empty water glasses when a sharp voice broke the air. "Hey you," said Mr. Harrington, the company's CEO, waving a sheet of paper. "Let's see if you're useful for something else." The room filled with laughter as he handed her the document, covered in foreign text. She froze, unsure if it was a trap. The words were written in Mandarin, and as her eyes scanned the page, her pulse quickened. Because what she read wasn't just business, it was something far more dangerous. "Would you like me to continue with the rising action next?" Alana's hands trembled as she stared at the paper. The laughter in the room grew louder, bouncing off the glass walls like an echo of mockery. Mr. Harrington leaned back in his leather chair, amused. "Come on now," he said, his grin wide and condescending. "Translate it. You'll earn more than a week's salary if you can." They didn't expect her to even try. To them, she was just the maid, a woman who dusted tables, not someone who could read Mandarin contracts. But as Alana's eyes moved line by line, her shock deepened. The document wasn't just some random letter. It was a confidential acquisition deal between Harrington Enterprises and a Chinese firm. Hidden in the fine print were terms that exposed the company's secret plan to launder millions through offshore accounts. Her breath hitched. This wasn't just corporate greed. It was fraud on an international scale. For a moment, she considered pretending she didn't understand. She could just hand it back, smile awkwardly, and return to scrubbing floors. But something inside her, all the humiliation, the whispered insults, the years of being treated like she didn't matter, told her not this time. Still, fear crawled up her spine. What if they found out she knew? What if they silenced her? She took a deep breath and spoke softly. "You want me to translate this?" Her voice cut through the laughter like a knife. The men stopped, startled by the calm in her tone. Slowly, Alana began reading. Word by word, her voice grew steadier, stronger, each line revealing more of their secrets. At first, Mr. Harrington smirked, thinking she was bluffing, but his expression changed the moment she mentioned the offshore bank accounts. The room went silent. His pen slipped from his hand. How do you know that?" he asked, voice cracking slightly. Alana didn't answer. She just kept reading, her eyes never leaving the paper. Every sentence peeled back another layer of deceit. Emails between executives, coded transactions, false reports sent to shareholders. The other men exchanged nervous glances. One of them reached for his phone. Another whispered something about calling legal. When she finished, Alana gently placed the paper on the table. The silence was deafening. Mr. Harrington's smirk was gone and replaced by panic. He stammered, "Who gave you this? Who told you to read it?" She met his gaze for the first time. "You did." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. The power in the room had shifted, and they all felt it. As she turned to leave, she heard him mutter under his breath, "She's just a maid. She won't do anything." But Alana knew she had a choice to make. She could walk away, keep her head down, or she could expose everything, That night she sat alone in her small apartment, the city lights flickering outside. The document burned in her mind. She had nothing, no money, no power, but she had the truth. And the truth, she realized, was worth more than any paycheck. The next morning, the skyscraper that once felt like a prison now stood before Alana like a battlefield. She had made her choice. With trembling hands, she clutched a flash drive, one she'd spent all night creating, filled with copies of the incriminating documents she'd secretly photographed before leaving the office. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the marble lobby, the same place where people had once looked right through her. Upstairs, chaos brewed. News had leaked that government investigators were probing Harrington Enterprises for financial misconduct. Mr. Harrington was furious, shouting orders, demanding answers. But when Alana walked into the boardroom, everything stopped. He turned to her, red-faced. "You think you can ruin me?" He barked. "You're nothing. You'll lose everything before I do." She didn't flinch. For years she had been silent, invisible, powerless, but now the truth was her armor. "I already lost everything," she said softly. "You just gave me a reason to fight." Before he could respond, a voice came from the doorway. Two men in dark suits stepped inside, badges flashing under the fluorescent light. "Mr. Harrington," one said, "you're under investigation for corporate fraud and embezzlement." The color drained from his face. He looked around wildly, searching for someone to blame, but all eyes turned to Alana. She stood tall, her maid uniform still neat, her expression calm. The same men who once laughed at her now avoided her gaze. The agents gathered the papers, escorting Harrington from the room. He glared at her one last time. "You'll regret this," he hissed. But Alana only replied, "Maybe, but I can live with regret. You'll have to live with what you've done." As the elevator doors closed behind him, the laughter that once filled the office was gone, replaced by silence and shame. For the first time in years, Alana felt something she hadn't felt since before her life fell apart. Freedom. And as she walked out of that building for the last time, she didn't look back. The headlines broke by morning. Harrington Enterprises under federal investigation. CEO arrested in massive fraud case. The news spread like wildfire, shaking the business world. Reporters swarmed the glass tower that once symbolized power and arrogance. But the woman who had brought it all down stayed far from the cameras. Alana Brooks didn't want fame, she wanted peace. In her tiny apartment, sunlight filtered through the curtains as she watched the story unfold on TV. For years, she had been the invisible woman who cleaned up after others' messes. Now her courage had cleaned something far larger, an empire built on greed and deceit. She didn't get a promotion or a reward. There were no parades or press conferences. But she received something more valuable than money, dignity. She had taken back her voice in a world that had silenced her for too long. Weeks later, she received a letter from a law firm representing whistleblowers. Her actions had triggered a full-scale investigation, leading to the recovery of stolen funds and the protection of hundreds of employees' pensions. She read the letter with tears in her eyes. Alana wasn't just a maid anymore. She was the reason justice had a chance. Still, she never forgot the humiliation. The laughter, the countless days when she felt small. But those moments had shaped her strength. They had turned her pain into purpose. One evening, she walked past the skyscraper that had once made her feel powerless. It now stood empty, its logo removed, its windows dark. She smiled faintly. Sometimes, the ones who are ignored the most end up making the loudest noise. She whispered under her breath, "They wanted me to stay quiet. I chose to speak." And somewhere deep inside she knew, her story wasn't just about her. It was about every person who's ever been underestimated, mistreated, or laughed at for simply standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Because in the end, truth doesn't need a title, it just needs courage.